Yeah, he's going to be a while. All right. Hey, I want to put a shout out right away to the Over the Hill Gang guys that are here today. What a nice turnout of cars you guys brought to honor Eddie today. And all the years of my announcing at Cajon Speedway, it was always a special night when the Over the Hill Gang guys visited the track and brought their hot rods out on the racing surface and put on a show for us. I'm here to, after 30 years of being the track announcer at Cajon Speedway, I'm here to tell you about the legend of Eddie Fitzgibbons. Bonsai Eddie Fitzgibbons, the driver of the 550 car. And a lot of, folks would ask me over the years, how do you come up with the nicknames for all these drivers? Like Ivan Doc Harrison, Lightning Larry Hagman, and Bob the Wildman Wiki. Well, a lot of times it was something about their driving style or the way they carried themselves around the speedway that brought on the nickname that they earned. But for Eddie, Bonsai Eddie Fitzgibbons, that name actually didn't come to my mind until, well, it happened at the desert. And I went farther back than just racing at Cajon Speedway with Eddie Fitzgibbons. And thanks to George Belton, who got me and my wife to come down to the desert one day at Gordon's Well and ride some three-wheelers. He got me involved in, in off-roading and going down to the desert with my family and friends. And I've been doing it ever since and have enjoyed it and created a lot of family memories and friends' memories in so doing. And our first desert trip, was a daytime thing, and, we were hooked. The next weekend, we were down there buying three-wheelers and all the gear that we needed so we could make a first desert trip with the group that went out to the desert that we were going to go out with. Now, let me tell you, the group that I went to the desert with was like a who's who of Cajon Speedway racing. I mean, it was a bunch of gearheads and mechanics that enjoyed wheels and went out there to tear out the sand. And let me, run a few names by you. Ron Overman, Larry Hagman Jr. and Sr., George the Blackberry Bush Bomber Bellman, Bobby Rowland, Spencer Tilton, Bobby and Ronnie Brown. All these guys that used to turn a wheel at Cajon Speedway, many of them champions. These were the guys that I went off-roading with. And needless to say, we had a lot of fun out there in the sand. And the first weekend trip that we made, I show up with my 2 3-wheelers in my van, and there was always a rule in this group, the drinking was saved for later, after campfire time. We were out there and rode safe but not sane, of course, and had a lot of fun going through the dunes. But then came the evening, and then we would set up the campfire, and everybody would come out after dinner and sit in their favorite chair around the fire, and then of course that's when all the lying began. So we had Bobby Rowland bringing out the peanuts and red hots. Patty Brown would spend most of the night pushing stink bugs into the fire to watch them explode. And then Billy Kramer and Eddie Fitzgibbons would see if they could build the tallest pyramid out of empty beer cans that they could. Well, about an hour or so into the evening, all of a sudden Eddie would stand up, say, "Okay, who wants to go on a bonsai run?" And I was sitting there, and I turn over to Bellman and I go, "What's a bonsai run?" And Bellman says, "That's when he gets in his dune buggy and goes through the gears and takes it up as fast as he'll go into the desert, as far as he'll go before the sand runs out. Do I want to go on this?" And so Eddie's, "Well, who wants to go on a bonsai run?" And he comes up to me and he says, "McGrath, you want to go on a bonsai run?" And then he looks at me with that, I just get out of the insane asylum look that he was famous for. "Are you chicken?" "Yes, I am chicken." I looked over at his buggy and I didn't see the line forming very fast over there. And then I looked over at Bobby Rowland and Spencer Tilton and some of the other guys, and they were going, "No, ixnay on the bonsai run." So Eddie would went over to his buggy, jumped in, strapped in, fired it up, and sure enough, off into the night he would go. Now this was in the early 80s at Gordon as well. And not very many people were into off-roading then and camping now. There might have been 5 groups in the entire valley. Now, we would listen to him go off into the night until we ran out of sound. I mean, it was that quiet out there. You know how far a guy can go in the desert before you don't hear him anymore? He could have been halfway to Glamis before he turned around and came back. Well, he did eventually come back, and his arrivals were just as spectacular as his departures. Most of the time he found camp. But one time, here we hear him coming from out in the distance. Sounded like a car going through Bonneville. He went right by camp. And I looked over at Roll and I says, he missed camp. Should we go out and flag him down? He'll be on his way to Mexico. Bobby says, no, he'll have to jump the canal to do that. If he comes back wet, then we'll go get his buggy in the morning. Another time he comes back from one of his bonsai runs, and all of a sudden we hear from the camp that was next to us a lot of yelling and screaming, and we all run over there to see what's going on, and people are throwing beer cans and firewood at this guy in a buggy. And then that buggy took off into the distance. A little bit later, here comes Eddie from the backside of our camp with the lights off. And he comes in the camp and he goes, dang, those people got upset. I said, well, what happened? Well, apparently these people, when they circled up their campers and trailers and their gear, they left a fairly wide gap in their circle. Well, Eddie, when he was coming back for his bonsai run, when he's driving along at 50 or 60 miles an hour, sees this camp, or what he thought might have been 2 camps. So he went right between both of them, right in the middle of their camp, 50 miles an hour. The last bonsai return that I remember that really got our attention, though, Eddie goes out on one of his runs, and he comes back carrying a treasure that he found in the desert. And it looked like it was kind of heavy. And he comes up to the campfire and boom, drops it into the sand. Bellman gets up and looks at it. He goes, what the heck are you bringing back, Eddie? He says, I found it out in the desert. It was an 80mm unexploded shell. Eddie, get that thing out of here, man. That thing's still a live shell. Come on. So Eddie grudgingly picks up the shell, walks it back to the buggy, puts it in the passenger seat, gets in, fires it up, and there he goes. Off into the night. We're all sitting around the campfire. And fortunately for Eddie, that did not explode. Eddie Fitzgibbons packed a lot of living in his 58 years. And I guess we should all learn from that, to live every day like it's your last, and make the most of everybody, love everybody, and keep them close to you and your family. And although the checkered flag may have dropped on his life with us here on earth, Eddie, I can tell you one thing right now, that Lord is ready for a bonsai run.